she's a director of strategic planning with ABBVIE, and she has a very interesting career background, which I want to share with everybody here. She currently leads strategy planning for the medical aesthetics function at ABBVIE. So since joining in 2019, she has led the talent management, talent development, talent acquisition, recruitment agendas while serving as HR director for Singapore. Whoa, what a heavy job. Now, prior to ABBVIE, Vanessa took on similar multiple leadership roles when she was with LVMH, for those of us who remember, DFS, overseeing learning, talent, and again, all HR matters related to the Singapore and corporate HQ officers. At Target Corporation, where she started her journey, Vanessa's career was fast-tracked to take on positions such as Organizational Effectiveness Director for the International Group, HR Director for China, Procurement Lead for Southeast Asia, and Merchandise Business Analyst for the US Group. She holds an Executive Master's in Change and focusing on Organizational Psychology, yay, from INSEAD, and a Bachelor's in Business Admin from Indiana University, Bloomington. And I know that Vanessa cares a lot about how she can help organizations use the human capital as a competitive advantage. I've seen her in action. I've heard her conversations with different individuals. And yeah, she is really someone who truly cares for people. And so today, she's going to share with us how professionals like ourselves can navigate career transition. Over to you, Vanessa. I'm going to stop share.
Thanks a lot, Eileen, and thank you to everyone for joining today's session. It's really such a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm just going to share my screen and just make sure everyone can see my screen.
I can see it.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Eileen, again, and thanks for everyone for joining today's session. I know it is an investment in your time. So I'm going to try to make this as fruitful as possible for everyone. And what I'd love to be able to do is to be able to engage in a conversation with you. I know that there were some questions that came through prior to the session and as part of registration. And so I just want to thank you all for just being here today. As Eileen said, my name is Vanessa Teo. I currently lead strategy planning for our commercial team for the medical aesthetics function for ABBVIE. For those of you who may not know, ABBVIE, we are a pharmaceutical company. We are based in the US and we have global operations around the world. This topic on navigating career transitions is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Why? Because as part of career, we all go through transitions. I have been through several transitions in life as well as at work, but I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. Eileen did a fantastic job earlier just introducing myself, but let me share with you a little bit about my career. I actually started out not in pharmaceutical, I actually started out in retail. And I didn't start out in HR, where I've actually ended up spending most of my professional life. I started out in the commercial function. I joined Target, which is a discount retailer in the US. I joined them in a commercial role. And I actually spent the first part of my career actually in a commercial role. I was working with the merchandising teams, trying to figure out what goes on the shelves. So if you were to visit a Target store in the US, you would see so many different kinds of things that we sell. And I was part of that team that kind of decides what goes on the shelves, how long it goes up there, how much of it to buy, and really managing that kind of an inventory. It was a fascinating role and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I had an opportunity to move around different roles in my career at Target. On one of my many rotations, I ended up actually in China. And this was actually my first step into HR. I was actually asked as part of one of my many roles at Target, I was asked one day, would you want to consider a time in HR? And I was taken aback, when somebody asked me, would you want to try this? I was thinking, do I leave my role that I'm really great at commercial, and do I really want to risk that? But you know what? I always kept an open mind. And when they said, would you like to try this role in HR? I said, sure, why not? I knew nothing about HR at the point where I became the HR lead for China. And that being one of the most complex markets outside of the US, I went on this accelerated path to just learn everything I could about HR and how to manage HR in China. But you know what? It was so uncomfortable for me, but it was so fulfilling, because that turned out to be a major transition in my career. After that, I ended up really enjoying HR and took on another role in organizational effectiveness that's also part of the HR function. For that role, I moved to Indonesia and I managed the global function from there. And then as life happened, I made another transition, and this time I joined, still in retail, but in luxury retail. I joined the LVMH group. And I moved into, again, an HR role, but I took on a Singapore role. This time I moved home to Singapore. I am Singaporean, a proud Singaporean. I moved home to Singapore and took on an HR director role. And then it progressed from there. And then I ended up taking on another HR role in talent. You will see after that, I took another transition, and I decided at that stage in my career that I had spent a significant time in retail. And I thought, you know what? I want to try a different industry. I want to experience a different kind of an industry and test my skills. And it's always uncomfortable when you make that decision, do I want to change a role or do I want to change an industry? But one of the great things about this kind of a transition is that it challenges you to think differently. I moved into the pharmaceutical industry in the capacity of talent management, talent development. I took on a number of different roles within ABBVIE. I've now been at ABBVIE for the last 4 years. And recently, I took a very bold move. You will see highlighted in blue. After almost 15 years of being in HR, I've decided now to make another pivot in my career and to move back into the commercial function, but this time in a very different role. I now lead strategy planning in commercial. Now, these are all major transitions for me. I thought I would share with you that transitions in career happen for all of us. For me, I've over 20 years of professional experience. I've taken on 12 different roles, 5 countries, 3 companies, and 2 very significant cross-functional moves. One when I moved from the business into HR, and after 15 years from HR back into the business. But career transitions can't be seen in isolation. Career transitions, as many of you may be thinking, do I change a company? Do I change an industry? Do I change the role? What do I do with my career? I wanted to share with you that career transitions also play a very big part in life. And one of the things that we always say is that, career is a marathon. And it is important to also recognize where in your life you're at. Throughout life transitions, this is something I've been through, having children, having aging parents, going back to school. All of these were major life transitions that at every point in life, I had to decide also, how does that career match up with the transition that you're going through in life? And some days it means pausing a little bit, taking a lateral move. In some instances, it means taking the plunge to move to a different country. In other instances, it means being back home, where you have the support of your family network. On some days, it may mean, because of life, I can't take a role that will require extensive travel. Sometimes, based on life situation, you are able to. So career transitions have very much to do with your own life transitions as well. So in all of this, I wanted to ask, as we think about this topic today about building brands, I reflected a bit about this topic. When we think about really great brands, and you are a brand, I am a brand, Eileen is a brand, all of you are brands. You are your own personal brands. And when I think about brands, I think of some really iconic brands in the world. And these are some iconic brands. And I want to ask everyone, when you think of these brands, when you look at these brands, what do you think of? What comes to mind? And
Yeah.
put that in the chat.
Yep. Please put in the chat what comes to mind when you look at these brands, like Starbucks. Ah, nice. Ken says quality.
High pay.
Yes.
Yeah. Good service. Fantastic. Reputation. Yes. Well, a brand is what you stand for. Good recognition, established, customer oriented. Thank you. Thank you. International, market leader. Yes. Brands are what you remember. You walk away remembering these brands. And when I think about these brands, you automatically think about all these great things about the brand. Well, how about you as a person? What's your personal brand? I'll share a little bit about my thoughts about what makes your personal brand. And these come from how I think about my personal brand. When thinking about how you're presenting yourself to the world, whether you're presenting it to the world, whether you're presenting it to an employer, a few things to consider. And I think of three big categories. First, I encourage you to think about what you stand for. What are your values? Now, your values are shaped by what you want in life, outside of work, inside of work, what you stand for in relation to your family, in relation to the world. What are your values? And it is important to be able to clearly articulate that. But then also, just like with those great brands like Starbucks and McDonald's and Singapore Airlines, what do you want to be known for? Now, it's very clear what those big brands that you saw earlier, what they stand for, because we've lived with these brands, right? But what do you want to be known for? What are some things that people will remember you for? What is your signature strength? What are you most knowledgeable and passionate about? And importantly, if I were to ask people who know you, how would they describe you? That's oftentimes the litmus test, right? If I think I'm a great communicator, but if I were to ask, the person who works with me 5 years ago, would that person say the same thing about me? If I were to ask my boss, if I were to ask a colleague, would they say the same thing about me? So knowing what you're known for and what other people say about you is really important. Now, why are these things so important? Being known for your strength and being able to clearly articulate that will help you to be able to clearly articulate that when you're writing up your CV, when you're posting your CV on LinkedIn, when you're in an interview with an employer, to be able to clearly articulate that and to be able to clearly communicate that, whether in terms of your examples that you're going to give, or whether it's in terms of the great things that you've done, you do want those to come through very clearly when you are communicating with an employer. I put in here also your development gaps. What are some things that you're still working on? What are your opportunities? What are those things that you believe that you're not super strong at, but this is a gap that you recognize that you need to overcome. And it's important to understand that, because you want to make sure that as you are developing as a professional, that you're not allowing these development gaps to overshadow you and then to be known for your development gaps. You don't want people to know you for your development gaps. You want to do what's necessary to be able to at least manage your liabilities, so that people will ultimately see your signature strength. So
Yeah.
recognizing that is really important.
And that you're a work in progress, continuous improvement. There's always a better version of me every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So Eileen, did you want to add anything to this in terms of building?
I really like this. I was just thinking that probably the audience is also thinking like, okay, so most of us would talk about our strength, but you are really unique here because you're talking about, hey, there's nothing wrong talking about a little bit of where you're getting to improve, right? Like work on your development areas. So I think that really lands a lot, make it more real and authentic, and that you're in touch with your real brand. Because if you're not, then people can sense, right? What kind of story are you trying to tell me? So this is cool.
I wouldn't lead a conversation by opening up to say, this is my development
Yeah.
gap. I would know it inside, and I would really make sure that you're doing what you can, whether in terms of developing yourself or whether it's in terms of, you know, really being mindful and self-aware of those gaps, so that you are in fact being able to at least reduce the liability or really work on that so that you understand what's necessary to overcome in order to get to that next role.
I like it.
Yeah. Building your personal brand, I think, is important because it helps you to really ground yourself. And it's all about knowing yourself and how you ultimately want to present your brand to the world. But what I also wanted to encourage everyone to just think about is that we don't operate in silos. When making a transition, any kind of a transition, particularly in career, we do need the help of people around us. And I wanted to introduce to everyone just the idea, and it's close to my heart because I often lean on a board of directors. Now, when you think of a board of directors, you think about the board of directors of an organization, right? These are people who are giving advice to management on how to move forward with strategy. You're thinking about performance of an organization and how you as a board of director member, how you're helping that. But you don't actually run the business, right? As a board of director. What I like to encourage us all to think about is, if you were to think of you as a personal brand, your own company, that's you, who would you consider as being a valuable member of your board of directors? So who would you consider, if you don't mind putting it into the chat? If you were to think of your personal board of directors, people who you would lean on for advice, you know, to challenge you, people that you would turn to if you are in need of a mentor. Eileen, your spouse, thank you. Your spouse, absolutely. Eileen, somebody said Eileen.
I know, right?
Yeah. A board of directors, and I wanted to share with everyone that a board of directors is really important to have in your network. Yes, your leader. So a board of directors, when I think about my board of directors, I think of people who are my advisors. You know, these are individuals who will tell you a difficult point of view about yourself. But they are also individuals who you know you could pick up the phone and speak to, get advice from. These are also individuals, though, that you want to make sure you are really investing the time in that relationship. Mentors, line managers, your peers, your family, very important, your subject matter experts, even industry partners. Now, boards of directors do change, and they change over the course of your career. They also change in the course of your life. Someone who was part of your board of director early on in your career may be different, but these are people that you want to go about investing your time in building your board of directors. Your board of directors are really important because they are individuals who can serve as an avenue for you to bounce off ideas with. to assess your own qualification. Now, sometimes you may think, why bother with a network of people? Networking sometimes can come across very fake. Well, it's not. Well, let me share my perspective. I think that board of directors can be really helpful because you get to assess your own qualifications, where you think you may be really strong at something. But when you are in the midst of industry partners, when you're in the midst of other subject matter experts, you'll kind of see where you level up. And some days it means that you need to beef up on some of your own skills, but it allows you within this board of directors to see where you stand. A board of directors challenges you. I've had individuals in my board of directors, like mentors, who challenge me to look at things that I never would have otherwise thought. I've had industry partners who I've kept close to me over the course of time, because they've also served as a resource library for me. If I needed advice in moving into a new role like HR for Singapore, or HR for a different country like China, who do I go to? Having that resource around you in terms of industry partners, peers, subject matter experts are really so important. And I would really encourage you to build on those relationships. Now, these relationships will take time. If you were to look at all these different segments, and there could even be more than what I have here, how do you go about doing that? How do you go about building your network? Well, for me, I always ask the question, when was the last time you took time out to have coffee or lunch with someone other than the person who sits next to you? When was the last time you pick up a phone and said to someone, hey, it's been a while, why not? Let's go out for lunch, to an industry partner? I think it's really important to also look at some of your old contacts, people who you've either worked with before, or people who've been part of your network. Sometimes perhaps it's someone in your external network that you may have met at a conference, but you really appreciated their point of view. Sometimes connecting with individuals like this can be really helpful. And when you're building those relationships, you're not necessarily thinking that you're going to call that person up for a job. Yeah. When I build relationships, I'm not thinking about that. Yeah. I'm thinking genuinely that there is something from you I would love to learn. And oftentimes that's how I open up a conversation. Hey, I heard you at that conference the other day, and I really thought that there was something in that topic that you talked about that I really enjoyed. Can we meet? Or it could be someone you may have worked with in the past before, and you happen to meet that person again. Open up the topic and ask for something, and ask for a meeting. There's always something about someone else that you could learn from. And I always approach these relationships with a sense of curiosity. I do think that your networks and your board of directors can oftentimes offer you some really invaluable support in navigating through transitions. Eileen, anything you would like to add about building your board of directors?
Yeah, I really like this part about, calling them up, just going through your contacts, because most of the time we tend to think like, hey, I need some advice, let's call them up. But what about just catching up and then going in with a sense, I like what you mentioned about going in with a sense of curiosity, like, hey, what's up on your side and all that, because it really helps. Because sometimes opportunities just come to you like that. Like when I got involved in a pull into a global assessment center gig, it was a, innocent catch up, innocent phone call, innocent ping, exchange of a text. And then what I would refer this person as a career sponsor, actually, I would say, because this individual who is not here, who is located in Europe, tends to look at opportunities and then just throw the opportunities over, without you asking. So I thought, your point about, hey, just call them up, go through your contacts. When was the last time you did that? I thought that was a very nice advice. Yeah. Sometimes a very small gesture can lead to something big, right?
And I keep these meetings with an open sense of curiosity. Wow. I'm not there to ask for a job. And I'm very willing to also build some of these relationships, because I think that it's really a part of the way I operate as well. I love to meet people, and I'm always very curious about what they're doing, what is there that they have that I can learn from. And the more you do this, the more natural it becomes. People won't necessarily think I'm asking for something from them, but rather, I'd love to just catch up. You know, oftentimes it's an old friend who may have texted me, and then I'll say, you know, hey, what are you up to now? Shall we meet for coffee? And it comes organically, it comes very authentically. And I think over time, people then recognize that you're there to, you know, because first you care for them. Second, you care for what they're thinking about. Sometimes it's about the industry knowledge that they come with. And over time, these relationships are harnessed over time. They're not harnessed just yesterday, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've got a question from the audience. So Eddie asks, what if you ask people out, but they say, you know, they respond by asking what he's doing now, and that they're not free. And then, yeah, I suppose they're worried about him asking for a job.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Eddie. I would say, you know, when you're building up your network, it will be over a course of time, and it will be with a variety of different individuals. Everyone would serve something different when you're building up this board of directors. I would approach it with a level of, you know, humility, but also just being very genuine. Really just want to catch up with you. I'm very genuine about saying, you know what, I'd just love to hear, I want to just see what you're up to. And sometimes one doesn't work, then, you know, let's call up a different person. Let's call up a different friend. Yeah. Eileen, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that happens to quite a few individuals. I can safely say that I've heard that kind of responses as well. The converse is also true, which means there are some individuals who have been asked to come out to network, but they feel embarrassed, like, hey, wait, I don't have a job yet. I don't want to meet anybody. And so they go into a recluse, and then they don't want to come out. Yeah, but to Eddie's question, I think just move on. Just move on. There will be people who tend to second guess. Are you only talking to me because you want a job? Yeah. So if they don't see beyond your sincerity, then move on to the next person. Yeah, but I think if you persevere, then people can really see through and really know that you want to speak with them genuinely.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great. Board of directors can be found everywhere. So I just ask you, just be aware of the people around you. Just be aware. Sometimes it's you know, your context and people in the industry could be right in front of you. Really cherish those relationships that you harness over time, and you just never know. Some days you will pick their brain for knowledge. Other days they will pick your brain for knowledge. But you know, this is my last one, and it's really understanding in career transitions. It is important to understand your larger environment. What environment are you operating in? So I like to think about you as the captain of your own ship. So when I'm steering this ship, I am the captain of my ship, but I don't operate in a silo. As a captain of the ship, I am also at the mercy of the ocean, the weather system. I am also at the mercy of potential icebergs. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is that we all have to understand that we operate in a much larger ecosystem, right? How do you fit into the larger organization, into your industry, and then into your world? And why is that so important to know? In career transitions, we need to ask ourselves about relevance, right? we need to first ask ourselves about the organization that we're in. So whether you're thinking of pivoting outside of your organization, whether you're thinking of staying in the organization, but a different role, you've got to ask your question about your company. How is business evolving? How will my role be impacted? Will my skills be relevant tomorrow? But then you've got to ask yourself, if you plan on staying within the same industry, then what are some of the new trends that are impacting my industry? Or what are some of those new skills that will be required? Because no matter how you want to transition, and if you're thinking of making that career transition into a new role or into something else, you got to ask yourself, will I have the skills, and am I effectively building the skills for the environment? And lastly, it is important to understand where the world is going. I know it's a big one, but it is a volatile world. It is important to ask ourselves, how is the way that the world is changing going to impact me and the future transition that I want to make? You know, do I have those skills? And what are those skills? You know, is my skill in HR going to be relevant tomorrow? So thinking about when you make those pivots and you're trying to look at transitioning your career, it is important to ask yourself, how does that impact the world beyond you? How does the world beyond you impact you as well? In my recent pivot, and when I made the transition from 15 years of HR into a business role, I asked myself the same few questions. How is my organization's business evolving? What are those skills I'm going to need for this new role? And just to make the example really concrete, I have to learn super fast about the medical aesthetics industry, about the commercial role. I have to understand very, very quickly, how am I going to take on this new role? Because it is a very different role from what I've had. And I've leveraged a lot on my board of directors, because I am not the expert in a commercial role, but I have to rely on my board of directors. It includes my mentor, it includes my peers, it includes the people in and outside of my organization. I called a number of industry friends, so I said, you know, share with me what these roles do. And then at the end of the day, you go back to your personal brand. When I made this career transition and took on this new role, I asked myself at the end of the day, what will people remember me for? My personal brand remains very similar to what I was in HR. You know, people will remember me for very similar things. They will remember me for the transferable skills that I've brought. You know, what was that personal brand? And I remain true to that personal brand when I come into a new role. But I may also change over time, but I will constantly need to go back and ask myself, what are my values? What are my signature strengths? And am I doing what I need to do to help to address my development gaps? So I think of these things when I navigate career transitions. I encourage you to also think about your personal brand, your board of directors, and the bigger environment that you live in. Like what I mentioned earlier, I think when we look at our personal brand, we go back to the questions around your values. What do you want to be known for? And what are your development gaps? So I encourage you, whether you're an introvert or whether you're an extrovert, to spend time in some self-reflection. I would really sit down and really give this a bit of thought. First, what are your values? You know, you've got to be very clear on what are some things that you believe are really important for you, all right? What in your career or in your job do you believe are very important to you? Then you do want to spend some time in self-reflection. And by self-reflection, I mean asking yourself some of those questions around signature strength. What do people know you for? And what do you want to be known for? I would also, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I would go ask some people who know you well. You know, ask the people you work with. ask the people who've been friends with you for a while, or even ask your family. You know, I would ask my husband, hey, what do you think people would say about me? Or what do you think about me? It will be very interesting what they say about, yeah, my husband sometimes tells me different things, but you know what? It's a valid point of view. And I would kind of write that down too. And at the end, just come up with that list.
Mm.
It is important because it helps you to reflect on yourself, not just what you think of yourself, but what others think of you.
Yeah.
And it would help you in writing out that personal brand.
Mm.
I would also say, really understand the areas that you're not super great at. I would also want to write that down, because you want to do something to help to overcome that, so that it doesn't become the one liability that people remember you for. You want people to remember you for your strength. So I'll give you an example. If I just pull back up this slide on your personal brand,
Yep.
I'll just share a little bit about myself. The values that are really important for me personally. And this is something that comes through in my choice of work, my choice of things that I share on LinkedIn. My purpose and my deep value is that I want to do types of work that will help to make a difference in the lives of people. And through my work, I want to drive business outcomes that will help people to really achieve their highest potential. So I could be an HR leader, or I could be a strategy leader, but I want to do things that will enable the business to really make that difference. And that's a value that I hold close to my heart. So when I am in a new role, I do ask myself, what is this difference I'm making? What do people know me for? You know, I guess I've spent time also just trying to understand and self-reflection as well. I think at the end of the day, people will remember me for being a communicator. Whether it's on topics of being a people topic, business topic, I believe I'm able to articulate a vision, especially on topics that I'm really passionate about and my signature strength. And I can speak quite passionately about those topics. So I want people to remember me for that. But do I have gaps? Yes, I do. Sometimes I do speak quite a bit, especially on topics that I'm super passionate about. People will tell me I can fill up the room. And sometimes perhaps not give space to others to express their views. So as my development gap, I need to slow down, I need to listen, and I need to involve people in that mind share. So that's an example of my personal brand. It impacts me
like this.
In the way that I look for roles, in the way that I pivot into new roles. I keep the values piece and the strengths piece as top of mind for me, but I also manage some of those development gaps as well. Thank you for that question, Sue. This is an important one. I think you've got to consider a couple of things. First, you know, I always think of career transitions, and when I'm thinking about whether I change jobs, whether I change organizations, these are huge decisions to make. I would make that in combination with stage of life. I would make it in, you know, as a holistic decision as well. You know, where are you at in life, and what are some of those parameters that you need to operate within, especially as it relates with life. I think that if a role or a job is causing you agony beyond a point where you feel you're really contributing and really goes beyond your level of happiness, I would say you should really take a step back and really reflect on what brings you joy. I think ultimately, you know, we're here in our lifetime really to you know, make a difference in whatever way you're here to do it. But I would ask yourself, what brings you joy? I would also ask yourself, what are your values? So going back to that personal brand, what are those values? What what would make you as an individual feel fulfilled? Because you've got to feel fulfilled in whatever you're doing. So if today's role is not giving you that, and you're spending many sleepless nights thinking about it, then I would say to really consider what are those aspects that you need to do in order to bring you joy. At the same time, I would also reflect on how much of this is caused by the environment that you're in. How much of it do you own as an individual? Is this something that you can change within yourself, or is this something you need to change within your environment? Now, we're all not perfect individuals. Some days I do things that irritate myself. Some days I do things that irritate even the people who are closest to me. So is this an issue that you need to resolve yourself within yourself, or is this something that changing an environment will help? So understanding your strengths, your development gaps, but also on my slide about understanding your environment. If you're part of an environment that's toxic, I would say this probably is not going to work out for very much longer. Yeah. I would advise, really look at what's really causing this. Is it you, or is it the organization, or is it the environment? And some days, it does take making some of those bold choices.
Yeah, it's so true. I totally resonate with that. Mental wealth first before financial wealth. To me, that's a priority. For sure. And oh, that's cool. Yeah, Mei Feng says thanks. Sue also say thanks. Oh, that's so nice. Yeah. So Mei Feng says your success transition story gave me encouragement when I start looking for a job after 2 years employment gap, taking care of the bedridden mom. Oh gosh, yeah. I hope she's coping well as well.
Whether or not you know what you want to do next, I think it's important first to self-reflect. Self-reflect on, again, I go back to the personal brand. I would self-reflect and ask myself, if I'm in between roles, I haven't decided yet, do I leave, do I stay, do I find a new role? I would first ask myself, what brings me joy? What types of roles, when I do certain kinds of roles, I do feel really energized. And then there are other roles that are more diminishing, as in I don't feel as happy when I do certain roles. What are those? Make a list. Make a list also about what are your values. What do you want to do when you get into a new role? Do you want to make a difference, or do you want to be in a role where you could help others, or do you want to be in a role where you are able to really drive the business forward? There are many different values that you could bring to the table, but I think it is important for you to reflect on that before you try to plunge into anything new. I would really reflect on that first. And sometimes the answers may not come as clearly when you just simply sit there. Some days, getting out there and immersing yourself into a new environment might help. So, for example, taking a career break. Now, if you are in a role and you're not super happy about it and you're just stuck, sometimes taking a short break could give you a sense of clarity. Taking a short break, if you're able to take a sabbatical, if you're able to take an extended vacation or time off, sometimes taking time off for a while can help you to gain clarity for the longer road ahead. If you're able to take some time off, it helps to clear your mind, and it really helps you to plan what you want to do in the longer term. So clarity of mind. I would also say, and this was a really great advice that a mentor of mine gave me a while ago, it is oftentimes very helpful to do small experiments. If you're not really sure what exactly you want to do yet, make a list of a few things that you think you might want to explore. And dabble in, maybe if you're still in an organization, you could ask for maybe a short-term assignment. Experiment with doing something different. if you're outside, if you're in between roles, experiment. Maybe you could do a part-time or a contract role. You could experiment with different skills. You could volunteer to do something pro bono. These are different ways that you can experiment with different skills without it necessarily being a full-blown job. But it's something that I had as advice from an old mentor before, about doing these small experiments to help you to figure out what you would really find joy doing. Use those, few points that I mentioned earlier about your values, about what your strengths are. I would not just sit there and try to do it by yourself in your room with blinders on. I really would go out and I would speak to your board of directors. What do people say about you? I would ask people around you, trusted partners. I don't think a brand story is necessarily decided by just you. I mean, if you think about those big brands like Singapore Airlines and Starbucks, and they do focus groups, right? They will call in different groups of people.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I would encourage you, host your own little focus group, call a few people or meet them for coffee, ask them out, you guys want to have lunch? I could really pick your brain on something. This is one of the things board of directors also really like. People really like when you're going to them to ask for advice. So sometimes to open up a conversation, I might say, hey, John, I recently moved into a commercial role and I could really pick your brain on how this function would work. Would you come out of coffee with me? I could really use, some of your ideas. And oftentimes what I find is that when you ask people to give you their point of view, they're very happy to spend some time doing that. When I think about my personal brand, the Vanessa Teo brand, and then I think about Starbucks or Singapore Airlines, what really makes people and customers really upset with, let's just say, Starbucks or Singapore Airlines? I'm not trying to pick on any one of those brands. What really irritates customers is when those brands overpromise, or when those brands don't deliver, or when those brands really disappoint you. So I would say, in crafting my personal brand, take a real hard look at being real with yourself, and being really real with what people can expect from you. I think the last thing that people want is for someone to overpromise and not being able to deliver. Now, I'm not asking you to be overly humble, but I'm asking you to have a balanced point of view. I would not say that I'm great at something if I don't even have any sense of what that is. So I will be really, really authentic. I think this is where, again, going back to your board of directors, having people around you who would really help to give a point of view can really help you to be balanced and can really help you to make things real. I would avoid also, in crafting your personal brand, you also want to talk a little bit about what you perhaps hope and aspire to do. So I would also be really clear on how you want to communicate what that aspiring part of you would be. I would like to be able to do some of these things. I'm great at these things, but I aspire for some of these other things. And I would really lean on your board of directors, and I would ask people around you to help in balancing that out. But I would avoid, just as any of those major brands, I would avoid being inauthentic, I would say. And you wanted to pick up one of those online assessments that sometimes can help you to know yourself a little bit better. I think StrengthsFinder is quite one that I think is quite widely used, and that could be one that you could use to just understand yourself and kickstart that process of elevating your level of self-awareness. if you are looking to join, for example, one of those functions that are transversal across all industries, for example, finance, IT, HR, these are roles that are transversal. I can use my HR skills in pharmaceutical industry, in retail, in finance, in tech, because the fundamentals of HR are pretty similar across industries. But if you're asking me, can you do a mid-career change into a technical role that is very specific to a medical role in pharmaceutical, I would probably say probably might be more difficult. But if you have the skills that are transversal in one of these other types of transversal skills, absolutely. I made a mid-career change into the pharmaceutical industry after almost 20 years in retail. I made that change, and it was about understanding the new language, the new commercial language, the new language of pharmaceutical industry, but fundamentally the way that you would operate HR is relatively, not all the same, but relatively similar in principle. I hope I answered that question. Oftentimes, I think when you're in roles like sales and marketing or business development, I think understanding first, what are some prior experiences that you might have? Sales and marketing can be quite specific to industry. And oftentimes, employers will be looking for relevant skills in this area. I would say, what are some relevant skills that you have to the pharma industry? Oftentimes, we are looking for individuals who've had some experience in this industry, the relevant skills and understanding the healthcare industry, healthcare professionals, understanding the landscape. Those things can be quite technical in terms of that type of a role. So understanding if you would come with that, and I would say if you do, then really play up those skills, play up those skills that you have. Really help an employer to understand how you've been able to really help organizations, you know, how have you been able to help your company in driving those sales and that kind of a role. But if you don't, I would first take a step back first. If you don't have prior experience in the industry, I would first take a step back and ask yourself, what are those relevant skills that you have that an industry, that a new industry would really want? So what are those skills? I think you've got to be able to clearly articulate what are those skills, because sales and marketing in different industries do require different kinds of skill sets, and I would be quite clear in articulating what those are that you bring to the table.
Very nice. So would you say that those who are in an adjacent industry, perhaps, you know, that would be like the closest guess, right? Because adjacent industry would dabble with the main industry or the target one that you're looking at.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, which are some of those adjacent industries, I think like what you mentioned, and what are those transferable skills?
Yeah, allied health, you know, can also come into play.
I was also one of those who took one of those courses. I did. Well, I went to a data analytics course, an HR data analytics course at SMU, and I did that because I did feel that there was a need, as I think about the industry that I'm in, and the future of HR, that HR analytics and being able to understand analytics is going to be really important. So I'll give you my story as an example.
Nice.
Took that course over a period of, you know, I did multiple courses there. Does it make me certified? Yes, on paper. But if you were to ask me, can I execute a role as a data analyst? I would say probably not. But that's my case. You know, I think a certificate is only the first step in to understanding that topic. If you want to truly be certified, I would also, as an employer, I would ask, what else did you do with that certificate? What else have you done to progress that level of knowledge and turned it into truly an expertise? So getting a certificate is only as good as a piece of paper, just like your education, right? Just like any one of us going to university and getting a bachelor's or what, the diploma, whatever.
Yeah.
What is truly important to an employer is, what did you do with that certificate? What did you do with that? So express to me in an interview how you use that certificate to bring value to your organization, how you're now able to, maybe do whatever that new skill is. In my case, data analytics. Am I able to clearly understand all of the analytics and insights that are being drawn out for me from ABBVIE's people analytics team? Can I truly understand? Can I interact with that team and be conversant in the language of data analytics? Do I understand how to harness that data, etc., etc.? So
or maybe lead them someday.
I mean, the key is,
Yeah.
what have you done with that certificate?
Yeah.
I
I like that. I really like that. And I think there is also something else, because as you do the, if I recall, that 6 months course comes with like if I'm not wrong, a capstone project, where maybe if they can talk about it, because those projects tend to be sponsored by actual organizations with an actual need. Maybe they can talk about it and then take it further and talk to similar employers.
Yes. Yeah.
But I get a sense from your response that, yeah, it's a good starting point. It is recognized, but it's not enough to land you the job yet.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
As part of, during COVID too, I actually pursued my postgraduate degree as well. Did I take time off? Actually, I didn't. I did it as part of my job. In my particular case, and everyone's going to have a different situation, I did it as part of my, I did it when I was still working. But there has got to be a really clear level of communication with my family on why I'm doing this and how I will adjust my time to be able to accommodate this extra time I need to put into school, but at the same time, the level of support I'm going to need from my family. So I did not take time off. For some people, it does make sense to take time off. For some people, it does make sense to take a break. It goes to life transitions as well. I would think of where you're at in that life transition to ask yourself, will it make sense? Sometimes it does make sense because it gives you clarity of mind. You can actually focus on school and not have to juggle so many other things in addition to school. It was a challenge for me doing it both at work and at school. I remember weekends were burnt. I remember having to sit down and tell my kids, I have to do this paper and I need peace for the weekend. So it does take a bit of negotiating.
Oh, nice. Oh, you've got a appreciation note in the chat.
Thank you. I'll speak on my perspective. When I'm interviewing candidates and when I see a career break, the first thing I'd love to know is, what inspired you to take that break? And what did you learn about yourself when you took that break? So the why and the what you did is important. Oftentimes when you're taking that break, I think it is important for you, for your own personal well-being, to understand why you're doing it. And when you do know that, it's also important to know, what are you doing with that time? And how has it, how did it contribute to your well-being, or to giving you that space, or to helping you to refresh, helping you to, educate yourself in a different aspect of life or of work or of education. So understanding why and what you do is very important. And I would communicate that to an employer. I would tell them, I took a career break for these reasons, and this is what I gained from it, and I do give a lot of credit to individuals who make those tough, who make those decisions.
Yeah.
And life happens through career transition. That's why one of my first slides was, career transition goes hand in hand with life transitions.
Yeah.
And we all make decisions that will impact life. So echo what Eileen is saying. I think it goes back to really understanding the needs of your client. Fundamentally, in any sales role, it's understanding what your customer needs are, what they want, what they need, and also what they don't know that they need yet.
Oh, I love that one. I really love that one. Oh gosh, yes. In fact, you're so right. Yeah, plant a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The best resource. I don't know if I have a best resource. Okay, so whoever's asking this question, I am in many ways like the person who's here. I'm always looking for new sources of knowledge, whether it's in an HR role, whether it's in any of these other roles I've been in. I'm a person who's always very curious about new knowledge, and I love to seek resources. So there are a variety of ways that you can build your knowledge bank. And I think of this as knowledge bank. You know, you have, just like your board of directors, you also have a knowledge bank from everywhere, right? So knowledge can come from many sources. One, thank you, Eddie, board of directors. The second is, you know, when it comes to education, I always ask myself, what is the skill that's going to be needed for me in HR or in strategy and commercial? What's going to be needed in the next 5 years? And I'm actively thinking about first the skill. What is that competency or that skill that I'm going to need in the next 5 years? And I'll ask myself, where's the best place to get some of these insights? So in my case, I'll give an example, HR. In the next 5 years, I see HR moving really into the space of data analytics, and to be able to be conversant, to be able to communicate well in that space and to understand it is crucial. So I then start asking, where can I get the knowledge from? Now, there's always a knowledge bank at any institution. So you can go on to SMU, you can go into Workforce Singapore, you can go into how all of you ended up here is also a perfect example of knowledge bank. But I would go into any one of those institutions, and they all tend to have executive development opportunities, and you can always just see based on that. And I did that. I went in and I looked at HR courses, and I decided to invest a little bit of time in some of that data analytics course.
Nice.
There are also a variety of books. I do like to pick up some books, oftentimes to listen, to read, and to see what some of the industry thought leaders are thinking about a certain topic. I could go on for this for a while. I have to tell you, if you commute on the train, I absolutely love podcasts. I love podcasts because they are really short. They are really, you know, when you're in a train, I'm also listening to some of the, you know, other than listening to your music, there are also actually a lot of thought leaders in certain fields that I oftentimes download those podcasts, and I'm just listening to it. My commute is about 60 minutes. So I listen to that, and oftentimes I can get through 1 or 2 podcasts, and it helps me to have that language and vocabulary that I need to, and I don't stop there. I may need to expand on that, and I then go on to look for other resources. So yes, there are a variety of ways. I go to my podcast, I go to books, I go to the institutions, the academic institutions, and I look for resources there. And of course, your board of directors. Thank you, Eddie.
You've got a couple more notes of appreciation in the chat. Whoa, this is so cool.
It has been really great to be able to spend the time with all of you today. Thank you for investing the time. I think every moment that you spend time in investing in yourself is always time well spent. Transitions and careers, you know, I would encourage everyone to think of the long game. I had a really great mentor who always said to me, your career is a long game. And along the way, you're going to meet various things that are going to happen both in career and in life. But remember that career is a long game. So play that long game. There will always be, you know, people who might ask you to do the short wins and all that, but really consider what your long game is.
So nice. So nice. Oh, you got another one. Whoa. To top off all
everyone.
the notes of appreciation. This has got to be the best session Workforce Singapore has organized. Thank you. Oh, wow. That's going to leave such an impression, Sue, in Vanessa's mind. Very smart. Very nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, you got more thank yous coming in as well. Yeah, I really, really appreciate your time, Vanessa. Everyone, you can find Vanessa on LinkedIn. She's I think lately you have become quite active. So and she is what you see. What you see is what you get. All right. She is what you see right here. Very affable, you know, and very approachable, and she really means well and really care for people. I can attest to that for sure. Yeah. Thank you again, Vanessa. Thank you. We'll see you another time for coffee.